I'm not a lawyer, but y'all remember Susan Lorenz, the woman who shot her neighbor through her closed and locked front door? Well, she got sentenced to 25 years yesterday, and I need you to watch a couple clips from her sentencing hearing. So a few people were brought up to have words, including AJ's mother, AJ being the victim.
My baby girl, my only daughter, Ajika Chantrell Owens, whom I gave life to, is gone forever. Susan Lorenz took her life at the age of 35 years old. There's no greater pain than to bury your child. Mere words can never fully explain this type of pain. The gnawing at my heart and the unending pain keeps me up every night. I lay in bed wondering, what were those last moments like for Ashika when she realized she had been shot in the chest by Susan? I think about what she was thinking when she was lying face down on the ground, fighting for her life, fighting to stay alive for her 4 children. Then I think about the sheer terror and the distress that my grandchildren went through, witnessing their mom dying at the hands of Susan.
There was also words from members of Susan's church, her sister, who spoke a lot about their childhood and some abuse that they suffered, as well as a licensed psychologist. And then Susan herself had words. And at first, she spoke about some previous encounters that she had with AJ.
Finally, I had to, say, you're trespassing, you really need to leave. And she picks up the sign and she says, "What, this fucking trespassing sign," and throws it at me. I've never, ever dealt with someone who was that violent that quickly. And so I was terrified of this woman, literally terrified. I've never had anyone, the first time I've met them, throw something at me and get so physically abusive. I had approached her because I was watering my plants, and she's going, "Oh, there's a crazy old white lady." And I'm like, you can't just go around saying someone's crazy. I mean, it was insanity. So I went to say something to her, and she verbally attacked me again. She's like, you've been calling my kids racist names and stuff. I said, "No, ma'am, I have not." And she kept getting angrier and angrier. The more I said no, the angrier she got. So finally I said, I was terrified. I mean, she went from a very relaxed position to a position here. I could see her neck veins starting to bulge. Her pulse is really getting, fast. And I'm thinking, she's going to beat the hell out of me right here in the street. So I said, "Listen, I'm sorry. If that's what you think I said, I'm very sorry. I don't mean to offend anybody. I didn't say it, but I'm sorry." So was I terrified? Absolutely. And just as far as the kids saying I said racial slurs to them, it never happened. As far as the child, Israel is concerned, he said I called him a slave. I have never called anyone a slave in my life. Not an adult, not a child, just something I wouldn't do. And to say that I called him the N-word is ridiculous. I've never called anyone the N-word. And I don't know where he's getting this from. I don't understand. I was married to a non-white man. He was actually Middle Eastern, brown skin, and someone had called him a sand nigger.
Susan girl, what'd you say?
And someone had called him a sand
Okay.
and a camel jockey. And I was highly offended. And I would never do that to a child, ever. I sang professionally in New York. I did jazz and the blues. I sang for Charles Gamble, Ernie Susser, and I sang with Larry Woodard from the Metropolitan Opera. Larry is black. Charles is black. Our pianist was black. Most of the girls who sang the blues and jazz were all black.
Not I got black friends.
I never had a problem with a black person in my life. This is not about race.
She also reads a letter that she wrote to AJ's family.
First and foremost, I am so sorry that I took AJ's life. I never intended to kill her. The night I shot that gun, I was confused as to why she was screaming and pounding on my door. I had an idea that Israel told her I had hit him. I could not understand why she was so angry. And she truly scared me. Now that I know he told her I hit him, I am just profoundly sad. Nothing I can do will change the outcome. I can only tell you I have cried and I feel horrible for my actions. Please accept my humble and sincere apology for this tragedy.
After Susan gives words, the judge begins his part. There was some talk about some letters who were written on Susan's behalf, but the judge says he doesn't consider that.
I don't generally look at letters and other things that are in PSI, and I didn't put any weight on them in this case. The reason I do that is because I think I've pretty consistently over the last 17 years sentenced the same, pretty much on the nature of the offense, whatever the person's prior record might be, and whatever I think they may do in the future. If I start looking at letters from friends, well, the problem is that I may give a break to someone because they have friends, and someone who doesn't have friends doesn't get that break. So I simply never do that.
Now, Susan and her team had a lot of claims about her childhood affecting her, some PTSD, and some other things, which they argued should allow the judge to depart from the typical sentencing guidelines.
Based on all the testimony, we would ask the court to depart from the sentencing guidelines and sentence her to, I think it's 538 days credit time served in probation so that she can get the mental health treatment that she needs as a condition of that.
But while he did say the PTSD was a valid reason for departure, nothing else in his opinion rose to that level. But he also says that the impact of what Susan did is so great that it outweighs any reason he would have had to depart.
There was no indication that she ever did not understand what she was doing, or that shooting at a person would be against the law, or that she couldn't conform with the law in any way. As a matter of fact, she seemed to be, prior to the shooting, calling the police. So it didn't appear to be any situation where her capacity was impaired in any way. I don't find there's evidence that the victim was the initiator, willing participant, aggressor, or provoker of the incident. Although she was knocking loudly in this case, there was no real attempt to get in the residence. She kept asking her to come outside. So I don't find that that departure ground has been met. Despite the existence of one legitimate departure reason, even if she did qualify for the other two departure reasons, I would not depart in this case, because I find that the aggravated nature of this case and this offense and the harm inflicted outweighs the mitigation or the departure when I weigh the totality of the whole case. So I find that the seriousness of the offense outweighs any legal departures that could be applied in this case. I'm primarily looking at the harm inflicted upon not only the victim, who of course lost her life, but her family. She has 4 children, all of whom were present during the offense or somewhere in the general vicinity, or at least home. It certainly will have a traumatic impact on their lives for the rest of their lives. They'll live their whole lives without their mother, which I think is a very significant harm inflicted upon them by Ms. Lawrence. When I look at the nature of the offense, I find that the shooting was completely unnecessary in this case. Ms. Lawrence was behind the door was locked. She had already called law enforcement. They were en route. She knew they were en route. She was in a relatively safe position. For some reason, she went into her room and found a gun. She could have stayed in the room and put another locked door between her and Miss Owens, but she came back out, put herself in front of the door, and at the time she fired the gun through the door, she was safe. Miss Owens was simply, although she was clearly banging loudly and was probably very angry over the whole situation, it appears to be she was mostly demanding that Miss Lawrence come outside, which would indicate she had no indication of coming inside the house. So when Miss Lawrence fired the gun through the door, she did so knowing a person was directly on the other side of the door. And she knew that person wasn't a burglar, she wasn't a robber, she wasn't a rapist. She knew she was probably upset about the interaction with the kids, but she had arguments with her before, and no real harm came other than, I guess, a sign was thrown at her. Paper sign. and that's when she decided to shoot. When I listened to every aspect of the trial and every aspect of sentencing here, the facts don't rise to a murder charge, but they are very aggravated manslaughter. Because this case, the shooting was based, I find, more on anger than fear. And I think that's pretty well established in this case. So when I weigh it out, and believe me, I find that, she's a victim of child sex abuse was a significant mitigating factor. And she has no criminal record, which is also a significant factor. However, we also have a tremendous harm inflicted upon this family and the victim's family. So what I'm going to do in this case is she being adjudicated guilty of manslaughter with a firearm, and order to serve 25 years in the Department of Corrections. With credit for 538 days. It's $100 cost of prosecution, $100 fine, court cost. Good luck to you, ma'am. You have 30 days to appeal.
And so Susan begins her 25-year sentence for the death of A.J. Owens.